The foot pedal obviously goes on the floor, and then there is the part you plug in. They're both connected to the same cord, goes into the sewing machine on the side, and then there's that switch above to turn it on. You can tell it's on because the light will come on. And then these two dials, the one on the top is the stitch length, and there's a little blue and red, as well as the buttonhole that you can turn it to make these different stitches. Mainly you'll use this straight stitch that it's currently set to, the buttonhole to the left, and sometimes the zigzag stitch. Particularly the zigzag stitch is good for stretch fabrics. I'll go over more of this stuff at the top when we do the threading of the machine, but in here we have the bobbin, and then you can slide this drawer open for storage tools and pull this off to the side if you need to do something like a sleeve or collar that needs to go around. Let's talk real quick about preparing your pattern. So you would usually have something to trace. I'm just doing measurements for this, and I'm using this marking pen that is air and water soluble, so it will go away eventually from air, and also when you wash or wet the fabric afterwards. So trace directly around your pattern and check if it includes a seam allowance. Most of them, I think, do not. Well, it really does depend. So I'm assuming that your pattern does not, because then you can choose your own amount of seam allowance. What that means is not cutting directly on this line, but giving yourself a little bit of extra. And you can also trace a separate line so that it's very consistent how much extra, because you can't sew the pieces together directly without, some excess to actually put the stitches through, if that makes sense. So that's what a seam allowance is for. So you will be stitching directly on this line, and you'll just have a little bit of extra to the side to actually be stitching through. You'll see what I mean as we start stitching. But first, winding a bobbin. Up at the top, you'll have your main color of thread on this pole, and there's two different sizes of these little stoppers that you can put on to keep it from flying off. And then threading the machine takes a little bit of practice to remember it each time, although it is labeled at the top step by step. And these first 3 steps are the same for the bobbin and the main needle, the upper needle. This is the tension disc. You're just getting it in between these two pieces, like in that groove there. And then for the bobbin, we're following along here, and I did record starting the bobbin and putting the thread in initially, or I thought I was recording and I had not pressed the record button, rather. So when you take this empty bobbin, you're just going to be putting the thread up through one of those tiny holes down through the middle, and then stick it on this post. Most importantly, you then shift this to the right until it is clicked against this other white buffer, and you press down the foot pedal and it will start winding the bobbin, and that white thing on the side will stop it when it gets completely full. Watch for the thread to stop turning so that you can lift off the foot pedal and move that post back to the left, lift off the bobbin, cut it free, and then trim off this little bit sticking up the top there from the hole. Here is where you put the bobbin in. So you pull this little black thing aside, and the lid itself shows you the direction to put the bobbin, so you can see which way the thread is supposed to go. You drop it into that hole there, and then it's a little bit hard to show where, but there's like a little thing to like loop it around right there in front of you. So you kind of hook it underneath this metal bit and then bring it over to the left and underneath that larger metal piece that you can see on that left upper corner. And then you will slide that lid piece back on, and and bring the bobbin thread up. And the way that you're going to do that, you first have to actually thread the main needle. So we're picking back up here where we're at step 3. We go to 4, which is underneath here, loop it up. You can move the hand crank on the side here to make sure that lever there is all the way up. So you can loop it around there and down. And then you're going to hook it underneath that big metal thing at the top there. And then this tiny little metal hook underneath that sort of screw. There is a needle threader that you can pull down. Now note, this is not the one that says push on it, but in front of that, this white piece. So there is a tiny hook there that goes through the eye of the needle. When you saw I rotated it into the needle. You may need to use the hand crank to make sure it's lined up. And then you move your thread underneath the hook to the left, and then underneath that hook that's going through the eye of the needle, and then gently pull it through, and then you'll be able to pull that little loop off from the back and guide the thread the rest of the way through. Finally, you will turn your hand crank on the side of the machine to dip the needle down and then pull on that thread to lift the bobbin thread up from the bottom and make sure both threads are underneath that foot plate. You are now ready to sew. Take the fabric pieces that you're sewing together, usually right sides facing each other so you're looking at the wrong side of the fabric. Slide it under here. There's some guides here for your seam allowance. So if you have a specific like 1/4 inch seam allowance, 3/8 inch seam allowance, there's a line here that you can follow. Finally, you need to put the presser foot down. There is a lever in the back to pull down, and that will pop that pressure foot down onto the fabric. Then when you press your foot pedal, it will stitch forward, and you'll hold down this reverse button here to just go back a couple of stitches, and that anchors and secures the thread. So it's basically like tying a knot, and then you can proceed forward with your stitching. And the more you press the foot pedal down, the faster it goes. So when you're starting out, you can just push it down gently to go kind of slow. When you're done with a line of stitching, you just do the exact same thing in reverse. So you'll stitch, reverse a couple stitches, and then move this hand crank so that this lever at the top is all the way in the up position. Lift the presser foot and gently pull out your fabric. The threads will come along, and there's a little cutting thing on the side here to slice the threads off. Lifting that top lever into the upper position really helps those threads to come out without catching or pulling. So that is why we do that part. And that's it. Now you are sewing.